Okay, hi. Yeah, so we're ready to go. Just give me 1 second here. Okay, now I'm ready to go. Okay, today we're looking specifically at the Southern Hemisphere horoscope. We saw some of the implications of the Southern horoscope already in the first few levels. And this is a little more thorough checkup. There'll be a bit of repeat. Let's see. Okay, this is just a Northern Hemisphere drawing as the stars and galaxies and things to the degrees of the zodiac, and the Northern Hemisphere to the sidereal divisions, and the Northern Hemisphere to the Southern Hemisphere divisions. We'll be looking at them. Okay. The Northern Hemisphere and the Southern Hemisphere in terms of stars have always been distinct. These Renaissance paintings were depictions of the Northern Hemisphere and the Southern Hemisphere stars with different mythologies and they had it mapped properly, had the directions, and they had the things working in a similar way, but without the chart being specifically there. Here, if they took the two charts and you just backed them up to each other, you would see how they would overlap. You'd see how in this chart, how the Virgo and the Virgo would overlap. The Canis Major, and then the Scorpion, and you see how the zodiac would make up. You also can see how on the top part on the right hand, the Southern Hemisphere chart, you see so based on the equator, the ecliptic's offset. Yeah, so you can see the Southern Hemisphere constellations. And okay, so there's just a few drawings like this. So people have been puzzled with the Northern Hemisphere, aware of these distinctions for a long time. It's another map that has the Earth in the center with the constellations superimposed above it for the Northern and the Southern Hemisphere. And again, there's the distinction between these. There's different constellations, different myths, different stories. And must have been about the 15th, 16th century, there was a movement in Christianity to rename all the constellations so they'd all be, instead of the 12 signs, they'd be the 12 apostles, and the different figures in the Bible would have their place in the stars, and the whole heavens would be Christianly aligned. And this is the copy of the maps for the Northern and the Southern Hemisphere. And but it never really, it may have been popular within Europe or within Christian world for a while, but it never really took over as the main star division or interpretation. But they had the apostles as each of the signs of the zodiac, and Christ was the sun. So yeah, I don't have them all memorized. Virgin Mary was the Virgin, and you had different ones on which ones they were, and different characters around on it. So this is here. I mean, you can always cut them and blow them up, and get a screenshot, blow them up to look at them deeper. Okay, so we're going back, starting from the age of Aquarius and the constellations and how they change. So we had the discussion between the three zodiacs: the tropical zodiac, the sidereal zodiac, and the constellation zodiac. And the sidereal zodiac was really a 30-degree measurement. That was a very unique convenience to fit to remember where the stars were in the fixed zodiac. But they didn't exactly fit the constellations. They more or less fit, were as closely aligned as they could get. Unfortunately, there are about 20 or 22 different sidereal zodiacs that have different starting points. They start at a different star, and it would place the age of Aquarius or the age of Pisces starting anywhere within 1,000 or more years. That's how wide the differentiation is. So there's a problem within the sidereal zodiac as to which sidereal zodiac is used. In India in the 50s, I think it was 56, the government had a big conference and they took all the astrology systems together. They were aware of all these different iamshas and different sidereal zodiacs, and they tried to come. In the end, they came down to decide on the Lahiri zodiac, which is what's basically being used in India now as the sidereal zodiac. However, when it made that decision, the argument was that it made that system because it was most closely aligned mathematically to the Western calendar, not because it was more astronomically aligned. So that's one of the debates. There's many different systems of it. There's several. For in India, they're very popular. There's some Western astrologers that worked very hard to determine to do the search on the sidereal zodiacs, and they ended up putting the fixed stars in set places in the zodiac. And this was the Fagin. He wrote the origins of the zodiac. It was his sidereal zodiac to try and fit the historical cycles. That is the one that I use. So in any case, when we came back to on these charts are a little more modern charts than the ones we used before. This has the arrow for where in the center you see the Aries Pisces. You see the arrow pointing to where the equinox is, and you can see the equinox between the bright colors all on the sort of bottom side and the dark colors all on the top, a little kiltered on the top side, but that's the meeting point, the spring equinox. That was the spring equinox against the stars in the sky, or against the sidereal zodiac. As it moves through them, it determined the Aquarius. And because it moves through backwards, the stars move forward in the degrees of the zodiac, but if you're measuring the precession of the equinox, or that zero Aries point, it moves backwards. There is a rotation, like, when you throw a plate down, the plate, it wobbles and goes around. It's like the one zodiac does that inside the other zodiac. So there's that cycle is a 26,000-year cycle. So 25,600 years. So this 1 degree about every 72 years, that's how the speed of the equinox moves backwards through the sidereal zodiac. So it touched the first star in the constellation of the Fish, 105 BC. Again, depending on which INF you use, some people made one system to just be at zeros when Christ was born. Some people use it for different reasons. Like there's a 1,000-year spread for which system is correct. So I think this system by Cyril Fagin did the most solid research in relating constellations and stars to setting the sidereal zodiac. This is what's used with a lot of Western siderealists. So that was 105. Now there's another argument that comes up. You see, since it was dealing with the spring equinox in the northern hemisphere where it conjuncts Aries, what about the spring equinox for the southern hemisphere? It would be Virgo. So technically, there's two ages at once. It's the age of Pisces, which the majority of population was in the northern hemisphere. Most of the Renaissance was happening in the northern hemisphere, and then the ideas so most people were there. So most of the literacy about astrology and astronomy comes from the northern hemisphere. It's not that there isn't southern hemisphere. It's just not as known or as many or as marketable, perhaps. But so what happens that when the northern hemisphere, this was just marking the age of the sidereal age of the zodiac. So when the sidereal, not the constellation, when it goes into the sidereal Pisces, when the zero Aries point touches the zero Aries, zero Pisces point, it's when the two zodiacs are exactly aligned. So Aries is Aries, Taurus is Taurus, Gemini is Gemini, and they're the same. This was the same, and it began in 228 AD. This is about the time that the Bible was written. as bringing in the Piscean age. I'm only using the Christian examples because they're clearer in my memory right now. But as soon as that, if you include the southern hemisphere side, which is the other half of the planet, the other half of the universe, if we look at it like that, the progressed ascendant in the southern hemisphere was going into the age of Virgo, was going in the southern hemisphere, it moves the other way, so it was going into Virgo. So these two charts is a northern hemisphere, southern hemisphere. It's easy to see them. Like you can see the color being the spring and summer, the lighter times of the year and the darker half of the year. You can see how they're reversed on the other side. But when you first look, it doesn't look exactly reversed. Why it's reversed is these two will fold back against each other. And you'll see how the two constellations of the Virgo or the Virgin is right here, and how they would back up and fold back on each other. Then Pisces would be over Virgo, Aries would be over Libra and Scorpio. So it's this folding back around. So you're looking at two sides of a piece of paper. If you took your chart, looked at it on one side, you turned it over and looked through the light at it, you would be seeing your southern hemisphere chart. You just have to change the signs and you have the southern hemisphere chart. Now, okay, I'm just double checking everything's working right. Okay, good. So, 220. So, the age of Pisces, when the zero Aries touched the first star in Pisces, was 105. 228 was when the sidereal age of Pisces began, and we used the example of Christ before as being born. And his symbol was always the symbol of the fish, of the new age, of the dawning of the new time coming, of the new era of faith and belief. Anyways, that's the idea, the association. And to me, it makes me feel like he was born before 200 years before the beginning of the sidereal age of Pisces. But if you take the constellational age, he was born just in the first 100 years of it, and that would seem far more appropriate. That's my associations, intuitive, you may call them. Okay. Now, I'm not the only one who's thought this way. I checked on Wikipedia, and here's an established school of thought. It is that an age is influenced by the sign opposite to the one of the astrological age, referring back to their precession of the equinoxes. As the sun crosses one constellation in the northern hemisphere spring equinox, it will cross the opposite sign in the spring equinox of the southern hemisphere. For instance, the age of Pisces is complemented by its opposite astrological sign of Virgo, the Virgin. So if you refer to the Piscean age as the age of Pisces Virgo, adopting this approach, the age of Aquarius will become the age of Aquarius Leo. Ray Grass, another astrologer, also claims this is that each sign of the zodiac is involved with the opposite sign. So this is what we're saying. We each have a northern hemisphere and a southern hemisphere chart. It's both. It's just the one is our conscious ego and the other is our more subliminal other half. So on a simple level, we have a distinct relationship to the opposite sign of the zodiac. We have a certain attraction, affinity with the opposite sign of the zodiac. Okay, so this goes on. It shows the sidereal age of Aquarius begins when the spring equinox comes to the sidereal sign. It's not the beginning of Aquarius, the constellation. It's the beginning of 30-degree division. That starts in 2376. And that would be same with the sidereal age of Leo. They would be, they're all 30 degrees, they're exact opposite each other. So you'd have the age of Aquarius Leo.